So Bellator 291 is going to be coming up this weekend, and welcome to the We Want Picks show, breaking down this card. It's going to be a pretty big one. It's Amasov's big return against Logan Storley, a fighter which he went to a split decision with in the past, and it should be a very entertaining fight. It's a big return. Obviously, Yaroslav Amasov is their 26-0 champion. They're pretty big guy that they can push, and also he has been in the headlines for a lot of different things recently. But it should be a big card for Bellator. It's going to be taking place in Dublin, in Ireland, so there's going to be a lot of Irish cards on the fight. I am Artem MMA. I do break down the Bellator, PFL, and Dana White's Contender Series videos and cards onto the We Want Picks YouTube channel. If you do want to have a 3 days premium membership on the We Want Picks website, you hear Angelo and Jacob talk about it all the time. It's where you can get their bets, and also there's going to be a little couple of things being added to the website. They're always kind of working on it. You can get a 3 days free membership trial using my link Artem on that website on the membership sign up. So that would be pretty good if you wanted to just check it out and see what's going on. But for now, let's get into my picks. So the first fight of the night is going to be Kasan Magomedov versus Rafael Hudson, and Kasan Magomedov is actually the younger brother of Zabit Magomedov, who has retired, but he's kind of hinting at maybe coming back, who knows, but he always does seem to make the headlines when he does bring things up. And his brother is a 22-year-old up-and-coming guy, 7-0, very good record and very good skill set as well, somewhat similar to Zabit in a way that he is very well-rounded, with both his striking and his wrestling, and he's fighting Rafael Hudson. And I think he really should be able to beat Rafael Hudson here. I mean, Kasan is a minus 950 favorite in this matchup here. Rafael Hudson has been losing to fighters that I just wouldn't consider to be as good as Kasan. You know, he lost to Kieran Clark, who was a very, very good prospect himself and is actually on this card. Both of those guys are pretty young guys coming up for Bellator 145 pounds. But I'm going to be going with Magomedov here. He literally is a minus 950 favorite, as I just mentioned. So he definitely should be able to get the job done. Minus 950 on the sports books there. And now we move on to the next fight. Stephen Hill versus Yoel Kudauja. I'm so sorry about the name pronouncing there, but Stephen Hill is the pick. He should be able to win this one here. Yoel though, or Joel, I'm so sorry again if I'm saying his name wrong, but he's not just any guy with a losing record. This guy really turned his career around, and it was actually kind of awesome. He was 1-8 at one point. Then he went on a massive win streak, fought Matthew Bonner, who's a pretty good guy over at Cage Warriors, an older guy, but a good test still, and he did end up losing that fight. But man, that was a great win streak that he went on, and now he's been signed to Bellator, fighting Stephen Hill, who is actually a very good wrestler in this welterweight division, and he actually did look pretty good in his last fight. You know, he beat Andre Fusi, who's not really the best fighter in the world, but he did still manage to beat him by decision, and all of before that. Prior to that, he's not really beaten the best guys again, but he is out wrestling them. His kickboxing's alright too, but I kind of noticed when I was watching a lot of tape on him, is that for the most part he does seem to kind of like to wrestle you, especially against the cage. Yoel Kudauja, obviously he went on that big win streak, but it kind of was just over guys with losing records, apart from Damien Bordeaux, who he did manage to defeat. But if we do go to best fight odds here, the odds for the fight, I believe, are pretty wide in the favour of Stephen Hill. And Stephen Hill is a minus 400 favourite, which is pretty wide. As always though, Bellator guys are really hard to find good underdogs. Unfortunately, it is the way that it is, but I do think Stephen Hill should get it done by decision. I don't believe he will be finishing Kudauja, but obviously he did lose by submission against Matthew Bonner, so maybe there's an opening for Stephen Hill. But I like Stephen Hill's wrestling in this matchup. And this next one here is Daniel Skatizi versus Dmitry Hodrusenko. I thought that I was going to be picking an underdog in this one here, because I was actually going to pick Daniel Skatizi. Daniel Skatizi is actually the favourite in this matchup. I believe he's actually a minus 220 in this matchup here, which did surprise me a little bit when I did see the odds. He's minus 220, and Dmitry Hodrusenko is plus 180. But the reason why I'm not picking Hodrusenko, although he is the guy with the 7-0, the flashy record, is this guy just hasn't really fought the best level of competition. You know, like his last win was over a 10-5 opponent, and then he did beat a 5-3 opponent, but he's not really fought anyone that great, and he definitely hasn't fought the level of competition that Daniel Skatizi has beaten. Like, Daniel Skatizi's got a win over Brian Hoy, who's kind of fighting all around the world, just fighting anyone and everyone. He's actually a very fun fighter, has KOs on his record and all that sort of thing. The 10-1 at the time, Gavin Hughes, he just come off the win over Davey Gallen, who's a very good fighter as well, Bellator veteran. He did lose to Vladimir Tokov, and he did lose to Alfie Davis, but Alfie Davis has gone on to do something with his career as well. I just like Daniel Skitizzi, dude. This guy is just much more proven than Dmitry Hitsenko, who's making his debut. The biggest step up in competition for Hitsenko. And I'm going to be going with Daniel Skitizzi. He does have finishes on the record, but he doesn't necessarily seem to be finishing the high level of competition when he does take them on, apart from that one win over Gavin Hughes. But I do have Skitizzi to win a decision in this matchup. Unlike the Tapology voters, I know he's not an underdog. I thought he was going to be, just based off the record, to be honest, but unfortunately, that is not the case. The next one is Kenny Mokohona taking on Craig McIntosh, and I am going to be going with a 4-0 Kenny Mokohona. I apologize, I said his name wrong the first time. I mean, Kenny is an up-and-coming guy with wins over somewhat decent levels of competition. 2-0, 4-1, good way to start his career. And he's fighting a guy with a losing record. It's kind of just as simple as that. He does have, obviously, wins, but he doesn't fight often. He's fought, 4 times in almost 8 years now. There's not a lot of information on Craig McIntosh as well. I will be honest, I did try and find a lot of his fights just to kind of see, like, what does he kind of bring to the table, like, what's his style. There's not a lot out there. I just got to go with the guy that's undefeated, really, Kenny Mokohona. He is a -900 favorite, which is pretty crazy, but at the same time, he's the younger, up-and-coming guy. He's from Ireland. You could probably say Bellator's just trying to set him up with a win here. And he's had all finishes, all first-round finishes aside from one in his career as well. So you've got to kind of go with Kenny by finish. I'm just going to say first or second round again. Once again, though, I don't really know too much about Craig McIntosh. I did try and find information on him, but there just wasn't a lot out there. This next fight here was one that I have pondered for a while. I'm going to be honest, I really wasn't too confident in this one, because I did see Gina Bishop, 37 years old and 4-0, and I was thinking, like, maybe Elena Koilonu should be the one to maybe get the win here. But I looked into Gina Bishop, and although it's a little bit sketchy because she hasn't fought this level of competition before, and she's mostly won by submission, and she has won a pretty close decision against Luana Santos, who is a good prospector in her own right. She's a very good grappler. She did end up in the IBJJF World No-Gi Championship. She went to the ADCC World Championships. She also won, obviously, the North American trials to get to that point. She's grappled with a lot of great grapplers, obviously, as you can see on her record. She's made it very far in BJJ, and now, kind of later on into her career, 37 years old now, she's decided to maybe make that transition over to MMA. So far, it's worked for her. Obviously, she had the split decision to Luana Santos, but Luana Santos is a very good up-and-coming prospect. She's very well-rounded herself. The thing about Elena is I do think that Gina Bishop is going to find the submission over her. Elena has never lost by submission, but she has won twice by submission. She is actually a very good striker as well. She's managed to get a couple of KOs, which is interesting, but I'm just going to kind of trust the fact that Gina Bishop's going to be able to get the fight to the ground and use that BJJ. It's not a confident pick. Unfortunately, with me, I'm not necessarily the best at picking women's MMA, and it's a very closely lined fight. Unfortunately, not an underdog pick for Bellator. They're hard to find. They really are. Gina Bishop is -120 to -110 on Elena, but I'm going to be going with her. Once again, though, I will just let you know it is not a confident pick. But in this fight, I do have an underdog, so we can kind of we can celebrate the underdog pick here. Asael Ajuj versus Liam McCracken. This is a tough one, and this is a fight that I would not put my money on at all because it's two up-and-coming guys. Prospect versus prospect. Two very young guys as well. Asael Ajuj, who is 4-1 with very good win on his record recently. He just knocked out Jordan Barton, who was 7-2 at the time. And I believe he was a very slight underdog going into that fight. And Liam McCracken. People have been DMing me about Liam McCracken because I am a bit of a guy that likes to know a lot about prospects, up-and-coming guys, Dana White's Contender Series and all that sort of thing. People have been letting me know about Liam McCracken. It's been more than one person too. I've probably had at least 2 people in my DMs just saying, hey, check out Liam McCracken. And I did. He's very good. He's a pretty relentless grappler. He's got first-round finishes only, which is always a little bit of a red flag. Like, how is he going to look if it goes into the second round? What if he loses the first round? Can he recover this and that? Which I know is a little bit of a sketch, you know what I'm saying? But he is the 21-year-old up-and-coming grappler, relentless grappler. He's had a very long career as well. Like, I'm talking in 2016. He made his amateur debut when he was 15 years old. Like, he's been around. He's got experience. I know Asael Ajuj is a very good up-and-coming prospect himself. Very well-rounded. He's got that very good win as well. And he does have an amateur debut as well, where he did kind of just happen to go to the European Senior and Junior Championships for amateur fighters. But I've got Liam McCracken. It's a tough one. He's a very, very slight underdog in this matchup if I can just kind of find the odds on best fight odds, which is somewhat difficult because there's such a big list at the time of me recording this. But I do believe Liam McCracken is like minus 104 and Asale Ajuj is plus 126. So I've got an underdog pick for you guys. I'm going with Liam McCracken to kind of find that submission because that's how I think he gets it done early in the fight. Not that too confident of a pick, I'm going to be honest, but Liam McCracken's just a guy where I'm kind of believing in that hype. I'm believing in what I'm seeing. The talent is there, the skill's there. Unfortunately, the experience against decent levels of competition is not there. But if he can get past Asale Ajuj, he really should have a pretty bright career ahead of him, considering this guy is only 21 years old, as I just said. Dara Kelly versus Dorval Jordan. Dara Kelly is a guy that is very much an up-and-coming Irish guy. Very much a guy that Bellator is trying to promote. He had a very successful amateur career where he went 9-0 in the amateurs over the course of about 4 years. And now he's moved on to being a professional. And he's actually been fighting some pretty decent guys just to start off his career. 3-0 and 3-1 in the Bellator cage. And now he's taking on Dorval Jordan. And you could almost argue this is a step down in competition for Dara Kelly, and as you would kind of expect with a lot of these fights, Dara Kelly is a big favourite in this one. He's minus 900 to beat Dorval Jordan as an only 2-0 fighter. He does train out of SBG Ireland and does fight out of Vrelon Gracie as well. Obviously a very good grappler, a couple of good submissions on his record. I think he beats Dorval Jordan. Dorval Jordan has lost by a submission before. And he hasn't been beating the best guys in the world either, and he hasn't fought very often. Once again, a guy which it was tough to find his fights, you know what I mean? Like, he just hasn't been fighting too often. There's not a lot of information out there about him. I think Dara Kelly gets it done, though, because he's just that hyped up prospect. He's moving down a weight class for this one as well, which is interesting. I just realised that it's at 145 pounds, not 155 like Dara fought in the last. And he's 6 foot, so he's going to be big for the weight class. It's going to be interesting to see how he does. I do think he finishes Jordan. I do think it's a step down in competition for him. I think he's going to get it done. As a minus 900 favourite, though, those odds are pretty wide. Piotr Nedolitsky versus Richie Smellin. Richie Smellin is kind of a guy I've been secretly hoping would make his way back to the UFC, but unfortunately, it seems like that dream is a little bit dead. He is going to be fighting in Bellator again. He did leave Bellator for a little bit. I'm not too sure why, but I think he just decided that he wanted to fight elsewhere for a second. He got a couple of wins there, a couple of finishes there, and now he's back in Bellator, taking a pretty big step up in competition against Piotr Nedolitsky, who not only is very experienced, who not only has a 17-4 record. He did beat Pedro Gavalho. I know that was by a split decision. It was a very, very close fight. But Pedro Gavalho is definitely not a guy to joke around with. He's actually a very good fighter in Bellator. I believe he's ranked pretty highly as well, or has been ranked pretty highly in Bellator as well. And also on the regional scene as well, he brings a pretty good game. He's a very well-rounded fighter, as you can see. 5 wins KO, 6 wins by submission, and 6 wins by decision. But where he does kind of get it done is definitely early on in the fight. He's very dangerous. A lot of first-round finishes on his record. But after that, he can definitely he can strike if he needs to. He can grapple if he needs to as well. But I think that he's just going to beat Richie Smellin over 3 rounds. You know what I mean? So I'm going to be going Piotr Nedolitsky by decision in this one here. I believe he is the favourite in the matchup. I believe it's almost a 3-1 favourite on the Piotr Nedolitsky side, which is somewhat wide because Richie Smellin's a good fighter. I'm really trying to find the odds here, and I finally found them. Minus 280 for Nedolitsky, plus 220 for Richie Smellin. Richie Smellin's a good guy. He's a training partner of Artem Lobov. I believe Artem Lobov and him seem to be pretty close. I don't know if that's still the case, but I know that Artem Lobov used to post about Richie Smellin pretty often, and I kind of always just hoped he'd come back to the UFC, but it seems like he's going to be in Bellator, which is all cool, you know what I mean? Now we move on to Brian Moore taking on Luca Levine. Brian Moore is one of those Irish guys as well that Bellator has had for a while. I feel like they've kind of tried to build him up a little bit, build up his record. But now, recently, he did end up losing to Nikita Mikhailov and Jornal Lugo, where they're kind of just probably trying to build up Jornal Lugo at that point, to be honest. But he bounced back with a good win over an older guy. And now he's taking on Luca Levine here. And Luca Levine is also an older guy. Once again, hasn't really beaten the best guys in the world, but he's not fighting bums, you know what I mean? I've got Brian Moore in the matchup here by decision. He is the Tapology favourite. I don't actually know the odds off the top of my head for this fight. Minus 450. Maybe a little bit wide. I mean, nothing that Luca Levine really did that I could find, once again. I did find a few of his more recent fights. I obviously found his ACB fight. I obviously found his Octagon fight. but nothing that he really did excites me all that much, and he really was at one point a really good prospect, and then he ended up losing a lot, and it started with a loss to Nathaniel Wood, who's now in the UFC and doing good things. But yeah, he's kind of fallen off a bit. I think Brian Moore's the guy that Bellator's probably wanting to win the matchup, and I've got him to win this matchup. Luca Levine as well, very undersized. He's 5'4" compared to Brian Moore, who is 5'8", which does kind of make a difference when it comes to 135. Norbert Navini Jr. versus Andy Manzolo. Honestly, when I first saw this fight, I thought it was a little bit of a weird one, you know what I mean? Bellator matching up a 5-0 prospect against a very experienced opponent, Andy Manzolo. And then I looked into Andy Manzolo, and I saw that he's a grappler, which is very evident by his wins. He's got 17 wins by submission. But then I looked at who he beat. This guy's got 26 wins on his record. You could probably count on one hand how many of those wins are over fighters with winning records. This record is sketchy, man. He's getting first round KOs over 9-9 opponents, 3-26, 2-2, 16-24, 15-14. That's a winning record. So was 7-2. But you just go through his entire record. His entire record is sketchy. He's got 2 wins over the same guy that was 21-16, 21-61 at the time. Like, the whole record is a little bit sketchy, and I genuinely believe you probably could count on one hand how many of those wins were over winning records. It is a little bit sketchy. He does have a couple of fights in Bellator. He lost them both to Kent Kalpinen and Charlie Ward, who once again is on this card. But it's going to come down to who I think is the better grappler in this matchup. And I think Norbert Navini Jr. should be the one to get it done. I know Norbert Navini Jr., somewhat unproven, hasn't necessarily beaten the best guys in the world, but the win over Will Fleury is a very good win. He's got a lot of first round finishes, second round finishes as well by submission. I'm going to kind of just trust them to be able to submit Andy Manzolo. I feel like the better grappler in this matchup is going to win because it is going to be a grappling fight. Andy Manzolo is definitely going to want it on the ground. Norbert Navini Jr. is probably going to want it on the ground. I'm going with him. He's a little bit more proven. He's beaten the better competition. I know it's a weird thing to say, considering Andy Manzolo probably has about 7 times the amount of professional experience as him. But I'm going to be going Norbert Navini Jr., and he is actually a huge favorite in this matchup, minus 350, which is a little bit crazy, but I kind of do see it. I mean, Andy Manzolo, 26-9 record, but it's a little bit padded. I mean, it is padded. It's sketchy, and he's older too. He's 38 years old. Norbert's the up-and-coming guy. Norbert's the guy that Bellator probably does want to win, you know what I mean? The next one is Gökhan Sarıkam. Gökhan Sarıkam versus Oleg Popov. Oleg Popov is a guy I kind of wanted to be in the UFC, but then he knocked out Antonio Silva, who may or may not be. I believe he's on like a 5-fight finish streak, maybe a little bit longer, and at this point it's getting a little bit harder to watch, and it's just kind of Poor Antonio Silva, man. It's just sad. But anyway, Oleg Popov knocked him out in the second round. 15 seconds into the second round. He's got a lot of KOs on his record. He's got submissions on his record. He's well-rounded. He's kind of got everything going for him. I like him in this matchup. He's a guy, once again, I wanted to see in the UFC, but Bellator has managed to scoop him up. So good on Bellator. And Gökhan Sarıkam is no joke. Gökhan Sarıkam is a pretty good striker himself, but he's also a very good wrestler. He beat Syed Soma by split decision, which was an interesting fight to say the least. He beat Kirill Senenkov by decision, Charlie Miller by ground and pound, and Joffrey Holton by ground and pound. So wrestler with good ground and pound. Oleg Popov, dangerous striker. Pretty good grappler and wrestler himself. I'm going with Oleg Popov, dangerous striker. I think he's actually going to knock out Gökhan Sarıkam, and so does the majority of the Tapology voters. And if we look at the betting odds here, Oleg Popov is a minus 220 favorite. I do like him in the matchup. I do think he should be able to beat Gökhan Sarıkam. But as a Bellator debut, Gökhan Sarıkam, he's got more Bellator experience than Oleg, obviously, and he's also on a decent win streak over a couple of good Bellator fighters as well himself. So it should be a very interesting fight. But I like Oleg Popov. He's just one of those guys that I've got a bit of hype behind. You know, I really do kind of like him as like a heavyweight prospect. Very good record as well. Very long win streak as well. The next one is Charlie Ward versus Mike Shipman. This was an interesting one for me because once again, I kind of feel like Charlie Ward is one of those guys Bellator probably wants to win. He does seem to have quite a bit of fans behind him. He is an older guy, but he does seem to be liked by a lot of the Irish fans. But I'm going to be going with Mike Shipman in this one here. I know he did just get knocked out by Gregory Babini, which I did not expect to happen, but it did happen. And I know he also got knocked out by Castello Vanstanese, but Castello Vanstanese is a pretty good striker himself. Split decision, loss to Fabian Edwards, Leon Edwards' younger brother. And he did beat Pietro Panini, who was 9-1, but he's not really on the best run right now, but I think he's going to be able to turn it around over a 42-year-old Charlie Ward. Charlie Ward coming off that loss to Fabian Edwards, who, he did lose to Mike Shipman, that is, but he made it a little bit closer. I know, probably different fighter and different ages and all that sort of thing, but Charlie Ward, you know what I mean, he's not necessarily the most well-rounded fighter, I would say. He doesn't have a submission on his record. He does have KO power. He does have a few KOs in the first round, 3 of them to say the least, but he hasn't managed to get a KO since 2020, and before that he was on a massive KO streak. Round 1 KOs, round 2 KOs, and he just hasn't been able to find it. He's actually a former UFC fighter. When he was 3-1, he was signed by the UFC. That's really embarrassing that I'm just finding that out now, to be honest. But yeah, I only watched his Bellator KOs around here and also his more recent Bellator fights. But I like Mike Shipman in the matchup. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. I think he should be able to win a decision over Charlie Ward. And I'm going to be going through and trying to find the odds again. And I just can't see him. But I do believe Charlie Ward's the underdog. He is plus 160, minus 200 for Mike Shipman. I've got Mike Shipman in the matchup, unfortunately, again. Not an underdog. I'm sorry, guys. I'm really trying to find these underdogs, but these are just the guys that I've researched, the guys that I've found the information on, the guys that I picked. I'm going with Carl Moore in the next matchup over Mashiz Rozansky. It is going to be his first Bellator fight in 9 months. He did beat Lee Chadwick, but Lee Chadwick is kind of just one of those veteran guys, you know what I mean, that kind of seems to fight anyone. And I believe he also lost to Modestas Bukauskas recently as well, actually. He beat Will Fleury. Once again, Will Fleury is a good win to have on your record. Will Fleury is a pretty good guy. Carl Moore's also a good guy. Once again, Carl Moore is probably the guy that Bellator wants to win. He is the Irish fighter here in this matchup, and he does have a very slight reach advantage, which he'll probably try and use. He did beat Carl Albrechtsen by submission, which I didn't expect. I actually picked Carl Albrechtsen in that matchup, and I was really hyped up about Carl Albrechtsen. Albrechtsen made me look like an idiot, and so did Carl Moore. He also beat Lee Chadwick himself, who obviously Rozansky just beat. But before that, he just wasn't fighting, dude. He took a lot of time off, you know what I mean? Took about two years off before the Lee Chadwick fight, and he took about 3 years off as well. Come back, just submitted Carl Albrechtsen, making me look like an idiot because I was really hyped up about Carl Albrechtsen. So I've got to go with Carl Moore here. He is just the guy that impressed me the most recently. Very slight favourite. Probably a fight to avoid, to be honest, but I'm just going to go with Carl Moore. You know, he did just manage to beat Carl Albrechtsen. This is the 4th time I said it, but it does mean a lot to me because I really thought that Albrechtsen was going to be something, but it is what it is. I've got Kieran Clark versus Leonardo Sinise. Kieran Clark, you know what I mean? Definitely one of those guys Bellator is trying to build up. He's from SBG Ireland. He's an Irish guy. He's 6-0, fighting in Ireland. A few submission wins as well. Happens to have all 3 of them in the 3rd round, actually, because he is a pretty good wrestler and grappler. And he is actually a very good fighter. He's actually beaten very good guys. He beat Jinder Noy, who was 8-1 at the time when he had a 2-0 record. It's just when he was starting his professional career. He did have a lot of wins and losses, obviously, in his amateur career as well. But if you look through it, all of those wins and losses as of recent were actually in the IMAF World Championships and European Championships as well for the amateur fighters. So that's kind of cool. And then he made his debut against guys with a couple of wins. He fought 6-1 Jordan Barton when he's 3-0, 7-2 Abu Tunkara when he was 4-0, and now he's fighting Leonardo Sinise, and it feels like almost another one of those fights where it's a step down in competition. Leonardo Sinise, he's bounced back with a 10 win, and a 1-2 win, and before that, once again, it kind of just was one of those moments where when he took the step up in competition, he lost. He's even been knocked out as well. Vladimir Tusov was 1-1 and he beat him, and he fought 5 times in the last 5 years. It's definitely a situation where Kieran Clark is the fighter that Bellator definitely wants to win. Keep that undefeated record intact. He's minus 350 in this matchup. I feel like, considering all the circumstances behind it, and it is one of those matchups where Bellator want Kieran Clark to win, probably not the worst odds, to be fair. We've got minus 900 favourites on this card. I got Clark by submission as well, so does majority of Tapology, but Sinise has been KO'd a couple of times, but Clark kind of does get his work done on the mat. He has actually never been submitted, and he is a grappling guy as well. But Kieran Clark, I think he's going to be the better grappler in the matchup. I think he's going to be able to beat Leonardo Sinise in his own game. Sinead Kavanagh taking on Janae Harding. Another one of those situations where I feel like it might be a step down in competition. If you guys don't know me, I am from New Zealand, but I am going to be going with Sinead Kavanagh here. She really should be able to get it done over Janae Harding. I know she is 37 years old. She's not really getting any younger, but I can just see her beating Janae Harding. You know, like her last two opponents were Chris Cyborg, you know what I mean? And then Leia McCourt. And Leia McCourt was definitely a girl that Bellator were trying to push for a long time. She's also got a couple of good wins, obviously. I mean, she ended up fighting for the title, for the Bellator title, against Chris Cyborg. But I've got to go with Sinead Kavanagh here. Janae Harding, you know, she's 6-6 in her career. She beat Marina Moknatina, which in hindsight is a very good win, because in PFL, Marina Moknatina's actually had a lot of success. She didn't actually have too much success last year, I believe, but Marina Moknatina is still a very good judo fighter, good grappler as well. She lost by ground and pound. She beat Jessie Mealy. I think Sinead Kavanagh, I mean, if Sinead Kavanagh wanted to take the fight to the ground, she probably could. If she wanted to strike with Janae Harding, she probably could. I don't see Janae Harding being able to finish Sinead Kavanagh. I mean, she's not Chris Cyborg. I think Sinead Kavanagh should be able to win a decision in this matchup. Kind of using all of her tools if she really wanted to. If things got messy on the feet, she could definitely take it to the ground. She's a -265 favourite in this matchup. Pretty wide odds, to be honest. I know Janae Harding has a pretty terrible record, but I believe that Sinead Kavanagh should definitely still get it done anyway. Peter Queally versus Bryce Logan. Now, I've got to go with Peter Queally here. You got to kind of consider Peter Queally fought for the Bellator title very, very recently. You know what I mean? He fought Patricky Pitbull for the title when Patricio vacated it, and then I believe he fought Benson Henderson, the former UFC champion, I believe. Man, getting my things wrong. I think he was the Bellator champion as well. Used to fight with a toothpick way back in the day in his mouth, which is one of the most insane facts I've ever heard in my life. But he should be able to beat Bryce Logan. A step down in competition for Queally. Definitely an opportunity to get back in the win column. I know he is 38 years old. He's an older guy. Bellator probably definitely wants him to win in Bellator, in Ireland for sure. I mean, the guys he just beat they just fought with Benson Henderson and Patricky Pitbull. Patricky Pitbull was the champion. Benson Henderson, the former champion. He beat Patricky Pitbull as well by Dr. Stoppage, actually. And he beat Ryan Scope as well to kind of get that, obviously, opportunity to fight Patricky Pitbull again for the belt after his brother vacated it. Bryce Logan, 3-fight losing streak. Georgie Karakhanyan, who's actually a very good fighter. He's still around too. He's a veteran. I think he's like 32-14 or something right now. Lost to Mike Hamill and lost to Mando Nallo. And I think Peter Queally's going to get this one done by decision. Queally's not really too much of a finisher. I believe like most of his fights have gone the distance. He kind of just grinds you down. I think he should be able to grind down Bryce Logan in this one and should get it done by decision. I'm trying to find the odds as well. This is awkward. I can't see the odds. I can just imagine Peter Queally being a pretty big favourite. He's only -180 in the matchup, probably because he did just lose his last two fights and definitely because he is aging. I can definitely see him getting the decision win in this matchup though for sure. Pedro Carvalho taking on Jeremy Kennedy. Now this is an interesting one for sure, because as I was talking about Pedro Carvalho earlier on, about the Piotr Nedolitsky fight, when he's fighting Richie Smalling early on in the card, Jeremy Kennedy is another very interesting case, because in Jeremy Kennedy's case, he just beat Aaron Pico, who's a guy that Bellator have put a lot of stock in, and unfortunately it just seems like Aaron Pico, I know he's won a lot of fights and it looks really good, but Aaron Pico, regarded as the greatest prospect ever by Bellator before they even signed him as a professional. Unfortunately, Aaron Pico, man, I know he lost by injury, but unfortunately, Aaron Pico just in general hasn't really been the fighter I think Bellator wanted him to be. But here's the thing, Jeremy Kennedy still won the matchup. Like, I know it was due to a dislocated shoulder, and I know that you probably could just call it like a fluke win, you know what I mean? And Aaron Pico probably would have won the fight if he did not dislocate his shoulder. But at the same time, Jeremy Kennedy's a pretty good fighter. I mean, Adam Borix beat him, and Adam Borix went on, I believe, to fight for the title. No. Adam Borix went to fight on in a title eliminator, and he beat Emmanuel Sanchez, and he's also beat Aaron Pico, obviously. Pedro Carvalho, though, just one of those guys with not the prettiest record in the world, but he's also just one of those guys that, as I said, he's a very good fighter. He's a ranked fighter as well. I mean, he beat Daniel Weichel, who's an older guy but very experienced, the guy that kind of just fights everyone. As I said, he lost to Patricio Pitbull. He lost to JJ Wilson, who's from New Zealand. Yeah, so I've got Pedro Carvalho in this matchup as the underdog here. Jeremy Kennedy, though, obviously got that very good record, obviously got that very good win over Aaron Pico in the fight. I just think Pedro Carvalho's underrated. You know what I mean? I do. I mean, he took Steven Seiler to a decision at that point in his career in 2019. I think Pedro Carvalho beats him, and I think he's going to be a pretty big underdog as well, and I think I'm going to get a lot of hate in the comments as well. Pedro Carvalho is only plus 125 as an underdog. Interesting. The way that Topology votes are skewed, I thought he's going to be a much bigger underdog, but I've got Pedro Carvalho. Underrated fighter. I like what I see in the tape. I've watched a lot of his fights, obviously. I mean, he's fought in Bellator for a while. He's fought often as well, 5 times in the last 2 years. Jeremy Kennedy has not been as active. He hasn't been in Bellator for as long. He lost to Aaron Borix, and now that I remember things correctly, Adam Borix, I believe, did end up fighting for the title. And it was Mads Burnell I've gotten confused with. Yeah, he made Mads Burnell look really bad. And in hindsight, that's actually not a bad loss. But I think Pedro Carvalho is just that guy, man. I feel like it's just one of those fights where a lot of people are going to disagree with me. But he could make me look silly. But I'm still going with Pedro Carvalho as the underdog, which is another Bellator underdog. I've got 2 of them on the card because I got Yaroslav Amasov in the main event, who is the favorite, minus 170. Yaroslav Amosov, he's got a very, very pretty record. Don't let it fool you too much, though. I'm going to be honest. It is a little bit sketchy until he got to Bellator. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was 18-0 fighting a 4-0 opponent. He was 15-0 fighting a debuting guy. He was 13-0 fighting an 0-2 opponent. Like, he was just kind of fighting anyone. You know, and he really built up their record. He did very good to build up the record. Actually, is that the real Roberto Soldic? Oh, my goodness. Okay. He beat Roberto Soldic, though, who's a very good prospect and a guy that UFC missed out on because ONE FC signed him. But I've got him in this matchup. I do believe that he should be able to beat Logan Storley. I know he did recently fight Logan Storley in 2020 to a split decision, and he's only fought once since then when he beat Douglas Lima. And to be fair, Yaroslav Amosov, unfortunately, due to the situation that is going on in his country and the way that he has decided to kind of I think he kind of put the belt on hold, you know what I mean, and let there be an interim bout so he could fight for his country in that kind of situation there. Logan Storley beat Michael Page by split decision. It wasn't that fun of a fight, and some people seem to think that Michael Page should have won it. It was kind of a lot of Logan Storley taking down Michael Page and not doing a lot with it, and also holding Michael Page up against the cage for a lot, and then Michael Page was having the success on the feet, and then he would get taken down. You know, it was kind of one of those fights. It was a weird one. I mean, it wasn't that very exciting of a fight, but it was just one of those situations where Michael Page just didn't really do enough with the short amount of time that he did have out at distance to get the win, you know what I mean? He beat Naaman Gracie as well. He's a very good grappler. Unfortunately, I believe he's actually gone on a losing streak since then. He beat Dante Shiro as well recently after losing that fight to Yaroslav Amosov. But I've got Yaroslav Amosov, man. I know it's a pretty tough fight to pick because, as I said, Yaroslav Amosov has been away for a long time. It's pretty hard to trust that he would have been making improvements in his game while he spent a lot of time away from training. But I do believe Yaroslav Amosov is going to come back and defend his belt over against Logan Storley in this matchup here. They've both got pretty similar games. You know, Yaroslav Amosov, pretty well-rounded fighter. So is Logan Storley to the most part as well. Logan Storley, very good wrestler. Yaroslav Amosov, also a very good wrestler, also a very good grappler. A lot of submissions, a lot of finishes on that record. It is also worth noting, though, again, a lot of those submission wins and KO wins were over these earlier opponents, you know what I mean? But it's still experienced, 26-0, very experienced fighter, very pretty record, but I do think he's going to get it done over Logan Storley. I don't think there's going to be a finish in this fight. I think it's going to go the distance, and I think Yaroslav Amosov is going to take it as the minus 170 favorite. Hopefully you enjoyed the predictions video. I apologize, it's just a little bit later than usual for me because I did just start university. Literally today was my first day, but I hope you guys enjoy it, and if you did like it, obviously do subscribe to the We Want Picks channel. Maybe check out my own channel, Artem MMA, as well. I really would appreciate all the support. Thank you guys so much for watching.